Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Mastering Midlife, How to Thrive When the World Asks the Most of You. I'm your host, Mark Silverman. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to a friend, a colleague, someone I admire tremendously in the world, Jeff Harmon. Jeff creates world-class leadership training programs through his company called Brilliance Within. He also has a program called The Intentional Leader, which is incredible, and he'll tell you about that at the end of the show. I've asked Jeff to join us, not because of his leadership expertise and all the things he could teach on another kind of podcast, but because he's a man like you and me who has children, who is building a company and a business for himself, and has faced challenge and is facing continued challenge. And that's, for me, what this podcast is about, is how do we thrive when life deals us unexpected hands. And Jeff is an example for me of someone who was dealt a hand that was tough and is shining and is creating, not only in spite of it, but because of it. So Jeff, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me. Really excited to hang out for a little bit with you today.
So cool. So why don't, in your own words, please tell your story of how you've come to this particular conversation.
So I'll start around 2006. I'm not going to give you blow by blow, but so 2006, a couple things happened. Number one, I call it my quarter life crisis. I was 32 years old and I was in IT. It's like, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. Newly remarried, and at almost the exact same time, I started to get clumsy. Well, I've always been clumsy because I have size 14 feet, but I started to get even more clumsy. And my wife was like, you need to get that checked out. And long story made shorter, I was diagnosed with a neurological disease called AMN, or Adrenomyeloneuropathy. And life didn't really change that much. I was still playing a little basketball, running a little bit, as much as I could, being newly married. And then in 2007, my first daughter was born. But I kept living, and life didn't change really a whole lot. Over the course of the next few years, my mobility started to get a little bit more challenged. And eventually, it was very noticeable to the outside world. I was in total denial, and it infuriated my wife, but I was in total denial. And then,
you're this big, handsome, strapping, athletic guy, and that's your persona, right? Yeah. And to admit something different is going to be tough.
Yeah, it's funny. I watched recently with my daughters, like to watch our wedding video, and my gait was already funky in 2005. And this was even before I was diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, total denial, but life marched on. I was in my career. I had made the choice during that time. I want to get trained as a coach, do leadership work. I have a passion for that. And then in 2011, I was laid off. I was made redundant by a reorganization. And I said, okay. Took me about 2 hours, felt like a punch in the gut for about 2 hours. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And I had a nice severance package, and I said, okay, let's keep going. And I'll officially start my own business. So this is in 2011. Struggled, as a lot of us as entrepreneurs do early on, figuring this thing out. Never been an entrepreneur before. And then in 2013, I was in Princeton, New Jersey, having a business meeting, or going to a business meeting. And in my funky way of walking, took a bad step, rolled my left ankle, and broke my tibia and fibula. Clean break, not compound, so no bones were sticking out, but it was bad. It was bad, and that kind of hit the fast forward button on my disease. I never got back to the mobility where I was. My leg healed beautifully, but the disease seemed to just like accelerate and never really got back to where I was. And then started using a cane, And then still was in a lot of denial that I could still do everything I could while building a business. So 13 had an amazing year, 14 business grew, 15 business continued to grow. And then in 16, I had this moment where I was like, okay, something's got to change. I was starting to be in the stands in life, like watching. We were making choices to not do stuff. My girls were growing. I couldn't keep up with them. I would get a lawn chair and watch them do their thing, and it was hard. But I was like, and this was around the time that you and I met, and finally 2016, I said, I got to do something significant to get my freedom back. And I made the decision, really hard decision, but a decision to get into a wheelchair. And took a while with insurance and everything. But by January 2017, almost the first week of the year, got my chair. And here we are 2 years later. I've now live almost 90%, 95% of my life in my wheelchair or sitting. If I'm not in the chair, I'm sitting. And all of this time, my business is growing. I travel. I travel about 20% of the time, 15 to 20% of the time. So I'm getting on airplanes. I'm speaking in front of audiences. I serve in a leadership role in my church where I get to teach and preach sometimes. So I'm up in front of the room in that respect as well. And so, you know my story, so you can remind me of things I might have missed, but that's kind of what I started in the story in 2006. So, man, 13 years. It's crazy.
So you got married, you had kids, and for me, the denial when you tell the story this way, the denial served you. You just kept going until you couldn't go anymore. So I'm actually kind of impressed with the fact that you just put this off to the side. You have things you want to accomplish. This you want to be a dad, you want to be a husband, and you want to build a business, and nothing's going to get in your way. So pushing that off to the side was the way a lot of us do that kind of stuff until life decided, all right, Jeff, no longer can you push that by the side. And accidents are no accidents. And then when you and I came together, the conversation was about your family asking you to let them support you and you dealing with the struggle of admitting that you needed support. Do you remember this?
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Mark. It's even more than them supporting me. The realization, especially with my wife, was I had to realize how hard this was for her to watch. She lived in terror that I was going to fall again. I was going to hit my head. That I was going to die because of that. And
So do you see how that wasn't pity? It was love for the man she married.
Yeah, absolutely. There was no pity there. It was, and that was, I think it was less about, yeah, I needed support. I mean, that's of course part of the story, but I think for me, knowing that realizing what my wife was living through on a daily basis, and when I fell in 2013, she was amazing. She turned our life upside down to be able to support me through my recovery from a severely broken leg. And she said a number of times, if you fall again, I don't know if I can do that again.
Wow.
And so I think for me, it was, come on, you dummy, get your head out of your butt and realize this person that you adore is hurting for me, not hurting and feeling sorry for herself. She was hurting for me and what could be or might be. So that was the big insight, I think, in this, is what my pain and my struggle was doing to her.
Wow. So the wheelchair would relieve some of her stress.
Oh, totally. totally.
So let's go to that time when you made the decision to surrender and get the wheelchair, because I knew you had travel coming up, and when you and I were talking, how are you going to travel in a wheelchair? You've been able to manage no matter how awkwardly before that. Now you had to figure out something different. What was that like for you?
Well, I got the chair, let's say, I don't know, let's say it was January 3rd, 2017. I traveled 3 days later, or 2 days later. I had a gig in Indianapolis. It's freezing, freeze like 6 degrees. And I had a gig and I stood in front for 3 days in front of a group of 200 leaders. I did actually stand. I put the chair and I would stand at a podium. But yeah, so I had to just figure it out. I was terrified. When I got the chair, I scoured YouTube for videos on how to get up inclines and what to do. But you know what? I had a gig. I had an engagement. I wanted to serve this client, and it really wasn't a question if I was going to go or not. I just was going to go and figure it out. And yeah, I'll give a plug here for United Airlines, because they're my primary carrier here out of New Jersey. They're great. They were very helpful. They remain helpful. I've never had any issues with United Airlines. So I know there's issues that are reported out there, but I mean, they made it easy. The airport makes it easy. My colleagues helped me and made it easy. So, I mean, I had no time to stew on this. I was 2 or 3 days after I got the chair, I was in the airport.
And right after that, you and I traveled to some of the same destinations. We went on hikes together, and there were places where you could go, and there were places where you couldn't go. And you just were game for whatever it is you needed to do, whether it be on stage, whether it be on rocky roads,
Yeah,
and letting the people who loved you help you when that was needed.
Yeah, so that was Sedona, end of January 2017, and I can remember our friend James literally carrying my chair on his back while 2 other people in our group were at both of my sides, while helping me navigate through some rocky terrain to get to the vortex, to get to this area that we were visiting and spending time at. That was overwhelming. That was overwhelming.
And over in what way?
Just the love and support and getting comfortable with accepting help. Because I don't need help. I don't need anybody's help. I got this. And that's sort of a motto with everything, and even till today. So just the process of people extending help and then me accepting help was, I can remember that those few days we were together in Arizona, that was pretty amazing.
So now you drive to gigs, and you throw your wheelchair in the back and you do what you need to do. Before we started recording this conversation, you and I talked about my awe in what you've been able to create at the same time dealing with this challenge. And you said that one of the things that was really important to you is to talk to people who are on the spectrum of acceptance, on the spectrum of can-do-ness. So in other words, if they're not as kick-ass as you and going on a hike in Sedona after they get a wheelchair, but they're home sitting and feeling sorry for themselves at the moment, that's okay too. And you wanted to make sure you address those people.
Yeah, there's this in our news feeds, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. There's this feeling sometimes that gets created. They'll put a video about somebody that's disabled or in some way or limited in some way, and they're achieving something great. And there's these, what's your excuse? Why are you? And I don't want that to be the message of my story. because every, everybody is dealt a different set of cards, and sometimes the best that they can do is make breakfast. Sometimes the best that they can do is just continue to work and not go on disability. Some of the times the best they can do is go on disability and just be at home and do their thing. So I don't want my story to be, oh, look at Jeff, what's your excuse? As not, that's not what this is about. This is about, in whatever capacity you can, to to be to be you. And just because today there's really no difference. Well, there's differences, but fundamentally there's no difference between 2005 Jeff, 2006, 7 Jeff, and 2019 Jeff. I mean, I'm there. I've grown, but you know what? I'm the same guy. I'm the same guy, and so um, yeah. There's no. There's none of that. Don't make any excuses type talk. There's no room for that.
Totally agree. We need to love ourselves at every step of the journey, whether we're making that much progress or not. So also at the same time, I remember you going out and you interviewed and you spoke to a bunch of people who had the same illness that you do and different physical challenges, and they were doing extraordinary things in the world, and you went out and interviewed them and learned about them to see how you could be of service to that community. What did you learn in those conversations?
What did I learn? Just the capacity of the human spirit. I mean, the human spirit is so powerful, and I would say, connected with that, a lot of the people I talk with shared my faith in Jesus, and that also the indomitable spirit and the joy that comes from that shared journey that I have with some of those folks was also inspiring. But you know what? It's interesting because I didn't pursue it long term. I wanted to have conversations, but it's not, even that is not. I didn't become the disabled coach. The coach
Right.
of the,
That was a side road. That was just something to explore. And what you realized was you had a calling that had nothing to do with your challenges and everything to do with your gifts.
yeah, yeah. It's just like I don't sort of place the label Christian coach or coach for Christians or leadership for or for disabled.
No matter
There's
how good
just
the alliteration is.
yeah, there's just so much work. There's so much work that needs to be done, and part of my mission is love the people that God puts into your life. Love the people that God puts into your life, and so that's changed everything for me. What's the gift in who He's put into my life today?
Yeah, it permeates everything and who you are. So my question for you is, the people that I've interviewed on for this podcast, I spoke to a gentleman whose father killed himself when he was young, and that was his quote unquote cross to bear. Another guy who put himself through law school even though he was dyslexic and learning disabled, and he hid that fact and still put himself through law school. I talked to another person who was molested as a kid, and he built a multi-million-dollar business, but that still messed with him as he was coming into his own and trying to ignore it, trying to suppress it. Life has a way of saying, no, you need to deal with this. So we all, I am severely ADD. I started out as an alcoholic and a drug addict and homeless, and couldn't get out of my own way, and that stuff still messes with me. And in spite of it, figured out ways to create. what messages do you have for people, no matter what the challenge is, through your experience? What someone's sitting in the car listening, what message do you have for them, whatever their challenge is, to rise up to be able to create whatever it is that they can or want to create?
One step. That's it. Just take one step. I mean, it's kind of funny talking about taking steps and I'm in a wheelchair, but yeah, just take one step. I'm a control freak, and I'm recovering control freak, and I need to know a lot of the time all the steps. And so I don't know whether it's just my maturity or my situation. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But what I've come to realize is I can only control the next step. I can control how I'm showing up right now, and I can only control the next step.
So in other words, being overwhelmed by the entire plan. In other words, you need to get on a plane and go someplace for a gig, and the first step for you was looking on YouTube to how people deal with wheelchairs.
Yeah.
So the first step is how do I sign up for a class? You're talking about taking baby steps, and I think that's for anybody, whether they have a challenge or not. We really only have control. We can't do anything in the future. We only have control of what we're doing now. So don't get daunted by the enormity of whatever journey you're trying to get on. Take that first step.
Yeah, and then just trust that process. Trust the process. You mentioned the business that I'm building now and the new product or service that we created. My coach just continually reminds me, he's been doing business development for 50 years. Jeff, just trust the process. Just do the next thing you know that you need to do.
And how do you find trust in the process?
Liberating and frustrating. So it's both. It's like there's a certain peace to know that all I can do is what I have on my plate today, or the next thing that I know I need to do. So there's freedom in that. And then it's also frustrating because I want to know, will this work out? What are the 10 steps? What's step number 382? I want to know that it's going to work out. And I want to do everything in my power to control the outcome.
So I'm going to lead the witness here a little, because I know you actually lean on your faith.
Yeah.
And that's where you can source the trust, when your mind wants to know, and your mind wants to go and judge and decide how things should be. I know you rest in your deep faith.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the truths that I ground myself in is God loves me with a love that I can't even begin to understand. That He has a plan for me. That His purposes may not even be realized for a couple generations. But I know His love for me is unquestionable. Unquestionable. It's not something I did to deserve. Didn't do anything good to deserve that, but I have it. And that is there's tremendous freedom in that.
Yeah, this conversation wouldn't be complete if I didn't allow you to get that in there. So any final thoughts on this subject that you want to share?
No, I think for folks that are listening, just keep going. Just keep going and surround yourself with people, a community. And I don't mean a community like tens and hundreds, a few people in your world that you can rub shoulders with and cry with and laugh with, and they call you out on your BS. And just that to me has been essential to this. Just keep going and surround yourself with a group of people that that you can trust, and that they trust you.
Yeah, and again, whatever your challenge is, that's for all of us. We're only as good as our posse. So that's a wonderful thing to leave on. So tell us about the Intentional Leader Program.
Thank you. Yeah, the Intentional Leader was born about 12, 13 months ago. And the vision that was born is, I want to make world-class leadership training and coaching available to every leader on the planet. It's training and coaching has become an elite offer. If you have the cash, if you have the gold, then you can access it. And it's just not right. It's just not right. We need leaders today more than we've ever needed them before at every place in our world. And so I set about the mission. So how am I going to fulfill that vision? That every leader would have world-class training and coaching available. And so the Intentional Leader was born. And it's a subscription-based service. Our base service is very affordable, and it delivers on a weekly basis, makes available a bite-sized leadership training that you do along with your colleagues in your organization. And then you also have access to a coach that can answer your questions, provide a resource, share an insight, ask a powerful question to get you thinking differently. And we make this available to all of our leaders on our platform. We have a mission this year to scale to about 500 or 600 leaders that are using our platform. Next year, we have a vision of 2,000. And then by 2022, our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal is to serve 100,000 leaders on the platform.
That's incredible. And I know the quality of what you're offering, so that isn't audacious at all. Where can people find you?
So 2 places I would direct them to. So my website, brilliancewithincoaching.com. There you'll see the headlines of the Intentional Leader and some of the other things we do in the servant leadership world. You can find us there to learn more about what the Intentional Leader is all about. Another great place, I would love everybody who's listening to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out most days. That's my network, my 24/7 networking party. So I would love everybody who's listening to reach out, make a connection, and in the connection, just put the word midlife. Just so I know that that's where you came from, and I'll connect with you and see how I can support you. Lots of free resources that I post and put out on LinkedIn. So that's my hangout place in the social media world. So I'd love to connect with everybody there.
Yeah, that you do put out an abundance of good stuff. So Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your story, being vulnerable, and making a difference to my listeners. And to everyone else, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments or enjoyed this, please share, post a comment. Let me know what other subjects you want to be have addressed here. I love you, and thank you for spending the time with us. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you again, Jeff, for being with us.
You're welcome.